Hello, and welcome to Positive Fandom. I'm your host, RM, and today we have Catherine Cooke with us again. We're going to be reviewing the Mandalorian TV series, Season 2, Episode 1 today. How are you today, Catherine?
Good.
I'm glad to hear it. When I think about season 2 of The Mandalorian, season 1 was such a success, and it was so different compared to anything that I had actually seen before. But I was completely caught off guard by what The Mandalorian was going to be like, and it was a little different from what the trailers for season 1 had provided. So, getting what we got, it was just such a surprise. But for season 2, I personally had a lot of expectations, and 2020 was kind of an extraordinary year. We had the Clone Wars season 7, which was, such a treat to have. So we ended up with a lot of kind of, great Star Wars content. And we also, got, of course, The Mandalorian season 2. And to be honest with you, both of those series kind of got me through the craziness of that time and Facebook and the fandom and talking about it, because there were no conventions or anything for us to go to. So, it was kind of nice to have this series and the Clone Wars. Like, if you guys, I'm sure everybody who's watching this are probably has watched the Clone Wars, but that final season 7 that no one thought they were going to get, we ended up getting it, in the same year, and it was just really phenomenal. What were your thoughts on getting those two at the same, almost at the same time?
Pretty nice. I remember when Clone Wars season 7 came out, I was like very curious as to which stories they were going to adapt because at the London Star Wars celebration, I think it was in 2016, there was a Clone Wars panel and Dave Filoni outlined like there were over like 60 episodes that they had left to go, like 3 full seasons. And he only spoke about a few storylines in particular. Like one was where Anakin and Ahsoka and Obi-Wan encounter an Uzong Vong scout ship on the outskirts of the galaxy. Another one was where Boba Fett and Cad Bane end up together on this mission to go out into the desert and rescue some kid. And there seemed to be obvious parallels with season 1 of The Mandalorian, and the basis of it was that they both like really get on each other's nerves, and that's how Boba gets the dent in his helmet when he shoots him. And he was talking about how they were going to finish the Maul arc because at the end of season 3 you had that cliffhanger where Sidious kidnaps him. And then because of the cancellations, it threw everything into a mess. And so I was like, man, whatever. Or maybe they would finish the Asajj Ventress story, the Dark Disciple storyline, which was going to be 8 episodes. But when he said it was only going to be 12, I thought, wonder what stories they're going to do. And the ones with the 2 sisters, I was surprised they did that one. It's like, yeah, I get kind of the idea of it, but it seemed like maybe you could have picked something else. Like, they ended up putting out a comic book to fill in the gap in Maul's storyline from when he got kidnapped to when he shows up again in season 7, which is a little jarring if you're like, you're watching his journey in one medium and then you have to put it down. And it's a shame because I read that comic book and it's like vintage Clone Wars. but that was a fun season. I admit that as much as I liked the final arc on Mandalore, I didn't care for the final episode of that arc very much. I did like the moment where Ahsoka's trying to tell Rex that, look, these aren't your brothers anymore. They're trying to kill you. But I thought that scene could have been a lot more emotional than it was because Rex is like, oh, okay. And then they just kind of go through the ship blasting everything. It's like, okay, whatever. But that was a treat to get season 7. And then, the tease for the Bad Batch also in that for the first 4 episodes. But I don't know if you noticed this, but it seems like in each successive Bad Batch episode for the season 7, that they became less and less the focus of the story. Like it started shifting to Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Echo. And I'm like, hey, well, let's go back to these characters. So it was nice that they got their own spin-off series. But yeah, I remember the trailer for season 2 of Clone Wars. I'm like, this looks really interesting. Like it wasn't really giving you any plot points. It's kind of going off into what looks like, scarier corners of the galaxy. I'm like, this is going to be like a fun adventure this time around. Oh, you're on mute.
Yes, you make a lot of good points. I'm sorry about that. And I agree with what you're saying too. For me, the Clone Wars season 7, I'm sorry. The Clone Wars season 7, what stood out really was just Ahsoka and Anakin meeting up again. And there was one scene and part of that season where Obi-Wan is talking to Ahsoka, and you can see he has like an incredibly worried look on his face, and I really like that. I was like, wow, this is so good. Like, you could feel the tension, and Ahsoka knew something was wrong. No one had to say anything, but it really was amazing because she had just seen Anakin a few minutes ago, or it felt like a few minutes ago, let's say, and Obi-Wan, just moments ago. And now, a few journeys later, things are also shaken up and different. And I really liked that. And I also liked how, Yoda was he wasn't indifferent to her. Although I felt that Windu was, because I think honestly, Windu was a little indifferent towards Ahsoka because he didn't know what to expect. And so, he was on his guard. But Yoda, he was just like, what's happened has happened. And, it's good to see you. And kind of that approach was a very different, maybe an approach for more experience. So that was very exciting to me. And yeah, I was, after getting that and then getting the Mando series, honestly, I was like, this is heaven. This is like, and thank God they did it too, because like I said, that year we were also enclosed, and, no one will ever understand this unless they live through that year, what it was like to be a fan and not be able to go to events and conventions and just even all the fun stuff that we normally do. So that social media and being able to kind of communicate with each other, right? Catherine?
Yeah, it's funny because I remember the day that they announced that they were going to cancel Celebration or postpone it, and they didn't have the new dates yet. And I had only managed to get Thursday and Sunday tickets, and I was on the light ticketing exchange list, but I was like number 479 or something on the list. And that doesn't mean you're going to get the 479th available ticket. It just means in that however many tickets per group. And literally overnight, when they announced that they were postponing it, I was to the top of the list, like within a matter of hours. And I was like, oh, but I kept my tickets anyway. And then when they announced August 2022, I'm like, man, that's a ways off. Maybe they're covering their bases. And then they moved it up to May, and I'm like, oh, geez, they keep jerry-rigging it around. But yeah, that was a crazy year. And I also remember something I forgot to mention, in season 7 of Clone Wars, in the Bad Batch arc, there was that one scene where Obi-Wan and Anakin are talking, and he brings up Ahsoka and how much he thinks that things would be going a bit better if she were here. And Obi-Wan's kind of, trying to make him feel I'll be all right, trying to kind of move on from the topic. And there was another similar scene in a unfinished 4-episode arc that was the animatics and final sound mix of which were included on the season 6 Blu-ray, where Obi-Wan and Anakin are on Utapau and they're camping in the wilderness, and Anakin's talking about Ahsoka again, and it makes the point that she's still very much on his mind, which I liked because I thought it was a little jarring even in season 6 or whatever when she finally leaves and he just kind of lets her go, which I thought was a huge deviation from Anakin's character, because halfway through the prequel trilogy, when his mother dies, every decision he makes from that moment on is based around the fact that he doesn't want to lose people. And so I thought that was a bit jarring in season. I still haven't grown to accept that kind of thing. But yeah, 2020, that was a crazy year. They had a lot of good content. And I remember the countdown that my friends in the Star Wars group, we were having to, season 2, because it just looked like it was going to be maybe darker, a lot more fun.
Definitely. And so, being able to kind of revisit it, now a year later is very interesting. Indeed, there's been a little bit more of a detente when it comes to this lockdown situation, but there's still challenges ahead of us. And, I'm being positive about next year. But this particular season, so when it came up for season 2, we did get trailers, and it was very exciting. Honestly, there were a lot of expectations, I think, and the trailers kind of hinted at different things, but this first episode, we find Din and Grogu doing exactly what we thought they would be doing, which is going through the outer rim of the galaxy, in pursuit of trying to find a Jedi for as he's called now, still the child. And here they are on this planet, and they're supposed to meet a gentleman by the name of Gor Koresh. And am I correct in saying that he is part of the underworld, Catherine?
For sure, this whole place looks really shady, and
Yes.
not a place you would take a kid under normal circumstances.
And you know what's so great about it is that, Grogu's kind of just sucking it all and he's like, oh, like just watching it all. And then I'm like, you should be covering his little eyes. He shouldn't be seeing any of that, but it's really too late. And Mando, Din is reminded over and over again, are you sure you want this kid to see this? Is this any place for a child? Are you sure? And he's like, well, he almost has to take him everywhere at this point.
Wow.
And, I don't think that we're completely out of the woods when it comes to, his protection over the child. But,
Well, especially in this scene. I mean, they're watching a great grudge match between two fit Gamorrean guards in this like big boxing ring with all these shady people around, and the kids just get loving it. It's like, okay, very
he's
weird.
like, he's like a kid who's watching an R-rated film and isn't supposed to, right? And so I kind of like this scene because we did get a lot of characters, and we have been seeing more and more, aliens. But we saw like the Abyssin and some Darth, I guess a Zabrak. Also, like I'm trying to think of who else was there. Obviously, the Gamorrean guards. I can't remember what type of alien Gor Koresh is, played by John Leguizamo. And I think he did a great job of portraying this kind of like very sleazy, tricky character who clearly has no good intentions towards Din or Grogu. And when they get onto the planet, they had that graffiti, and graffiti usually is a sign that something is bad, in this area, because
You notice something when you look at the graffiti. One of it looks like maybe C-3PO or maybe R2D. I'm like, is that supposed to be graffiti of these people? Because they might be famous people in the galaxy, or people would know them. The legends of how the Empire fell. Oh yeah, it was this little band of rebels and these people.
Yeah, I think it's very clever that they chose those particular characters to put on the walls. And of course, we could immediately recognize it and wonder, what obviously the legends have spread throughout the galaxy. And, it's nice to kind of see those things for stuff that we're familiar with and stuff that would be important to everyone after, the Empire fell. Another very interesting part is, so when, obviously, Din goes in and speaks to Gor Koresh and says, I'm looking for, any Mandalorians. Have you seen any? And Gor Koresh, of course, as I said, is very sleazy and very like sus, so to speak. He's not truly going to have Din's best interest at heart, and makes it very clear that he wants his Beskar armor right from the get-go, and knowing very well that the only way he could get that Beskar armor from Din is to like rip it from his cold dead hands. They all kind of like, he stops the fight and draws a pistol on him, and so does his entourage. And that's when we see Din activate the whistling birds.
Yeah, and what's funny is right when he's about to do that, Grogu, seeing that trouble's about to start, because he sees him open the whistling birds on his wrist, and then the kid's like, "Uh-oh," and he reaches out and he hits the button to close the pram, and it's like at first you don't really see what's going on, because it's almost like as if it were from Grogu's perspective. It's like all the lights go out and everybody's screaming, and running away, and then he gets in like Mando gets in like a grudge match with the others, and eventually corners Gor Koresh.
Yeah, and the match goes from the ring to the sidelines, right?
Yeah.
And the Gamorrean guard, he jumps out of the ring, and the Zabrak is there, and the Abyssin is there, and he's knocking them down, and like it's he still has to fight them off, even though he did the whistling birds just to kind of get everybody out of the way. The Twi'lek is there. One of my favorite parts is when I think it was the Zabrak who punched his helmet, and behind him is the Twi'lek. So he punches the helmet, and the helmet reverbs and like knocks into the Twi'lek, and it like knocks the guy out. And I'm like, I'm loving this. They don't learn. They keep punching the helmet. They keep punching it. And it's like, don't you guys understand this is made out of Beskar? Would you please just stop doing that?
Even Gor Koresh recognized that this is Beskar's a lot of money, and all of his thugs are listening to that, but they're still like, no, let's not go for the weak points, like at the neck or at the elbow joint. No, let's just keep punching the helmet. Yeah.
And then, Gorkaresh, when he finally realizes that Mando is not going down, he runs away, as you said. Mando pulls out his vibro blade, and that's when he's like kind of finishes off everybody. And of course, he captures Gorkaresh and hangs him outside, but he does get the information he wants from him, right?
Yeah, he finds out that there's a Mandalorian has been seen on Tatooine, which is surprising because initially it was because he wanted to find a Jedi, but having apparently failed at that, he figures that, well, if the Jedi fought the Mandalorians like the Armorer said, then maybe the Mandalorians know where the Jedi are. And so he's like, and it's funny because Gorkaresh is being dangled upside down from the street light, and he tells him what he wants to know. You can find it. There's one that's been seen around Mos Pelgo on Tatooine. And I knew it was going to happen because the deal was, you don't kill me. And he's like, okay. So then as Din walks away, he destroys the lights, and you see the monsters coming and getting eaten. I'm like, oh, it's brutal. I love it.
It is fantastic. And it's, a fitting end to, a ruthless gambler or peddler or underground person anyway. And very well done. And, of course, you just see Din and Grogu float off into the distance. Obviously they go to Tatooine. And as they fly into the planet, we get to see so many great views in these episodes, like when they're approaching Tatooine or when they've finally flying into the atmosphere of the planet. We get to see a Tusken Raider on a bantha. And I was like, oh, it's a Tusken Raider. Like, you just get that exhilaration of when you see something like this. And of course, it's a foreshadowing for the episode, but it's still really nice to see those little touches because they didn't have to put that in there, did they?
No.
So it's kind of good to kind of get those little extra little nuances in it, and it sets the tone in there. Sometimes the little things do matter in episodes like this. And so we find him back in Pele's bay, ship bay, so to speak. And she's of course over the moon to see the child. And she says thank the Force. So what's kind of interesting, I haven't really ever heard that term before. Have we heard this term before? And
No.
Okay, so have we even read someone saying this before? Like,
not. That's a new one.
Okay, so it's kind of interesting. Maybe it's just something that maybe is colloquially said on Tatooine, or just Pele saying. But it makes me wonder if she knows a little bit about what's going on. And after she kind of says that, Mando kind of tells her, I've got to find this thing. She says she doesn't know anything about too much other than, she hasn't seen a Mandalorian in years. And, in fact, I guess Din is probably the only one she's seen probably in a long time. And I have a feeling that Pele has had, seen a lot of people because of where she's located, perhaps, on Tatooine. But, and then we get to see where Mando says, oh, I have to go to Mos Pelgo. And she's like, I got to look at a map for that. And of course, she summons, is it it's the R4 unit, right?
Yeah.
Or R5, excuse me, R5.
Yeah.
And of course, everybody immediately knows this unit because this is the one from A New Hope that was no good. And they ended up trading it in for R2. He actually probably was fine. It's just that R2 had to make sure that he ended up with, I guess, Luke, right?
Yeah, there was a story, and I can't remember, I think it's in the certain point of view story for A New Hope where R2 tells R5 everything about why he's there, what's going on. And so when they pick R5, R5 deliberately blows his lid. So that way they pick R2.
Exactly. And so to see that unit, that droid again, the astromech again, was fantastic. He pulls up the map for Tatooine, and that's when Pele shows Din exactly where Mos Pelgo is. I can't remember. And so he sees it, and she's like, oh, by the way, it was very dangerous after that. The Empire fell, I think is when she kind of is referring to it. And she's like, I stayed away from that place. I stayed in the walls. I was afraid to, and she still does. And, if Pele is staying inside, I kind of got the impression that she didn't leave where she lived. And we've now
No.
gotten confirmation.
Yeah, because she's, Mos Eisley used to be a really bustling spaceport and all that, so she's still hanging around, even though it's not that way anymore. Another thing
Exactly.
that happened was right when he first arrived there, her pit droids start going towards the ship, and Poe says, "No, no, he doesn't like droids," and then he changes his mind. He's like, "No, it's fine," and she's like, "Oh, really?"
It is quite a change of things, and he was just so determined not to have those droids service the Razor Crest or even come near him, honestly. Like, he was actually shooting at these droids to keep them away from the ship. So now he's a little bit more open, and she noticed that difference in him. And she also said that if you go into Mos Pelgo with your Razor Crest, everybody's going to know you're coming there. So if you're trying to keep a low profile, the Razor Crest is not the right vehicle to go in with. And so he's like, "Oh, do you still have that speeder bike?" And she's like, "I sure do." So so he hops on the speeder bike.
But I got the sense that uh, she was helping him because she wanted to babysit Grogu again, so she's trying to send him away.
She definitely is thinking, "Go ahead, do your adventures. You're here for an adventure. I'll watch the child while you're off, doing whatever it is. I have no problem watching him." I mean, she totally loves Grogu. And I think it's very funny. I think that, the amount of fans that grew from the end of season 1 to the beginning of season 2 was just really astronomical. I mean, it's really interesting because as you are already well aware, and everyone is very well aware, there were no toys or anything like that to purchase for that holiday season when Grogu was first introduced. So this upcoming season would be the first season where, all the merchandise was out by now. And, we even had, sort of like high-end collectibles like Sideshow and Hot Toys that were manufacturing, $400 statues of this child. So I think it's very interesting how, that love of this child has just really blossomed. And we can see that Pele is one of those people who loves the child. She even, as an aside, says, if it ever buds off or there's another one, I'll gladly pay you for this child. So it's kind of cute. And you're right. She really loves this child, and she's going to take good care of him, which she did before. And the thing is, though, that he decides to take the child with him this time. And I think that he has learned that he can't leave the child alone. So even if he's not alone, but let's say the child has to come with him. So he's not going to leave it up to chance. And if we do see in the future, which we will in this season, that he does kind of step away from the child, he's and anything happens, he zooms right in and goes to collect the child when he can. But it's very interesting to see this interaction. And I think that Pele's interaction reflects, the overwhelming fan response to this Grogu character. So, Din gets onto the speeder bike with Grogu, and and they get to this mining town of Mos Pelgo, and there's hardly anything there. Like, it's, you see a few buildings,
Like a
maybe
one-horse town.
it really is. And this is where the Western really shines. Maybe this is one of the most Western style episodes of the series so far. And I really loved seeing that. He kind of parks the speeder outside, and he leaves Grogu in the speeder, but of course Grogu follows, and he comes in and speaks to the bartender, which is pretty amazing too. We also see he does spend the night with the Tusken Raiders on the way there, but we also see some other critters on Tatooine. I don't know what they're called because I can't remember just now, but we are still seeing some more people who are inhabiting Tatooine, which is nice. And so he speaks to this Wekwe bartender, who's very nice, very, like an amicable person. And it just reads just like a Western. I'm looking for a Mandalorian, And he's like, oh, well, what does that look like? Someone who looks like me. Oh, you mean the Marshal? Like this really is a traditional Western style everything. And that's this particular moment when everybody has the oh my gosh moment, when Cobb Vanth, who is the Marshal, enters that bar, right, Catherine?
Yeah, because he was a minor character from the first in the Aftermath trilogy. It's mentioned that he got Boba Fett's armor from some Jawas, and sure enough, he's wearing it, and it's more banged up than it was before. And Din immediately says, "Oh, you have to surrender this because it's our, my culture and blah blah blah." And he's like, yeah, "Forget that." And I earned this fair and square. He's like, and Din's like, "No, you must have killed a Mandalorian for it." He's like, "No, I didn't." So then he tells him the story about how the Mos Pelgo used to be kind of a peaceful place, and it didn't seem like the Empire had much influence there, but I guess they did. And you actually see, it's really funny, on this big hologram, you see the second Death Star blow up. It's like, oh, I guess there were news cameras there at the time, which is silly. But Cobb Vanth says that after that happened, this mining guild came in and took over, were pretty ruthless. And they tried to fight back. It didn't really work out. He ended up stranded out in the desert, gets rescued by some Jawas, and he sees Boba Fett's armor there. And because he had helped the Jawas, they're like, well, we could, come to a deal or something. He's like, well, I'll trade you for the armor. And they're like, okay. So he takes the armor from them, and that's how he got it. And Din is kind of suspicious. He not really sure if he should believe this story. So the Marshal continues, and he says, well, I came back and I just ran the guild out of town. Which he does pretty easily, and you finally get to see him launch like the Boar missile out of Boba Fett's jetpack, which is pretty cool, and blows him away as he's scaring them off. And that ever since then, he's just been kind of I'm the boss around here now type thing, and the village has kind of calmed down and been peaceful.
I mean, is Cobb Vanth like the luckiest man in the world, or what? I mean, you just happen to come across Mandalorian armor. Oh my gosh. I can't even believe it. Like this guy, it's true that as he was leaving the town, he happened to have these crystals with him, and he could use that, and he was out in the middle of the desert, as you said. He was going to die out there. And, like they literally do this scene where he looks up, and it's one of the Jawas, I can't remember what they're called, but
sand crawlers.
Yeah, one of the sand crawlers, and like he's very lucky. This is like unheard of that he would have even been found. But he had these valuable crystals, and honestly, I think the Jawas must have known that was Mandalorian armor. It's just that the crystals might have been worth a comparable price, maybe even more. I don't have no idea how much those.
That was the funny thing about it, because they're the ones who rescued him, but he decided, he insists on paying them for helping him because he's a nice guy, and he gives them, and they're so enamored that he has these crystals to pay for that even though they've already saved him, they're willing to give him even more. And that's what was kind of surprising. And it's like, I don't know what they're going to use these crystals for, because the Jawas certainly don't pay for anything. They just steal and scavenge, as we've seen. So that's why Mando's listening to this story, and he's very skeptical as to whether or not it's true. And he's like, well, you're going to give me the armor. And then it seems like they're going to have a big tense standoff. And all of a sudden you hear like this big tremor outside. So what's going on? And they both run out onto the patio, and you just see, and I immediately thought, oh, cool, it's Tremors. We're going to have graboids in this movie.
It is an episode of Tremors, isn't it?
They're coming down to sort of, and then it's like when Cobb's like, okay, I'll tell you what, I'll give you the armor if you help me kill the thing, which is really funny, because Cobb was like willing to get into a standoff with this guy and was being all tough about it. And now he's just like, okay, I'll give it to you if you help with this.
Yeah, they've got a big problem. This creature's just rolling in, and it's like a giant, literally like a dragon rolling in, terrorizing them to death. Honestly, they're losing people. They're losing whatever they're mining for. And
the livestock.
Livestock. He can't do anything about this. It just scooped up that bantha like a snack. I mean, this is really totally messing them up big time. And honestly, Cobb Vanth is kind of seizing this opportunity to really just beg Din for help, because Din could just take that armor from him, couldn't he?
Yeah, he could, but he's not. It's like you have to really push his buttons for him to like kill you. Kind of like when he saw the Jawas ripping apart his ship, or when he got cornered at the when he first went to go encounter the child. And so it's like, and yeah, again, he should have killed his former friends in that earlier season when they gave him every reason to do it. But so here he decides that, okay, I'm going to be a nice guy, and oh, there's honor here, so I'm going to do that for you. And they're like, okay. And so it's like, okay, well, we have to set out and find the beast.
And this is the first time we're really seeing a crate dragon, isn't it?
Yes, because we'd only previously seen the skeleton on the hillside in the original film.
Yeah, and then from what I understand, or at least from what I've been told, is it still in Tunisia? Is it still on that hillside somewhere in Tunisia?
It might be. I know because I know that the homestead set is still there, falling apart like crazy. I know that some of the buildings from Mos Espa are still there, and when tourists come there, there's like people selling drinks and stuff outside of some of the huts, which is funny. And the hotel that they used for the inside of the homestead is still up and operating. Looks the same.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'd love to go there one of these days if I find myself in that area of the world and visit and see what's left. But I couldn't help but think of that. It was really one of the first scenes that we see in the entire universe, let's say, in live action. So, we saw this crate dragon. It looks very scary. It's very loud. It shakes everything around. It's not going to be easy to defeat it. And Mando wants to go ahead and use the ship to do it, but Cobb Vanth says you can't because the creature will hear you and it'll just go deep into this ground and you'll never be able to find it. But Cobb Vanth knows where its lair is.
Yes, he says that we got to, trek out there on our own, and it's like, okay, because he made a deal and he's going to honor it.
And so he takes Din to the dragon's lair, like I remember that game from the 80s. Din is still riding his land speeder, but interestingly enough, Cobb Vanth is in one of like a modified pod racer land speeder, and that was pretty cool to see. It's like you knew right away, you're like, oh, that looks like a pod.
Well, it's a remnant of Anakin's pod racer because he sold it and it was still there. It's the same one.
It certainly is. And so it was good to see that. I mean, that definitely was an Easter egg there. Also, what's very interesting is when they do arrive or close to where the crate dragon's lair is, they encounter some massives, and they're on guard, but then Din uses his abilities to charm the massives, and then out pops a whole bunch of Tusken Raiders. So Din clearly knows at some point after talking to the Raiders that they also want the crate dragon killed, because I guess maybe they can't pacify it anymore. What they've been doing is feeding it and trying to keep it quiet, but it truly is something that's going to degrade or strip them of all their resources. And honestly, Catherine, has our interpretation of Tusken Raiders changed because of this series, do you think?
Yeah, and it's also interesting that we don't know when Din Djarin first met them or how he learned their sign language and all that, but Cobb Vanth is very hostile towards them, which is so odd because these people actually live there and they don't know how to communicate with them. They don't know anything about them, but Din seems to know everything about it. And they have they're sitting at the campfire, they're talking about what they're going to do, and Cobb Vanth gets really testy with it, and Din has to kind of, okay, let's cool off type of thing. And you see how they also use their the Tuskens use their gaffy sticks to clean the teeth of the banthas, and
he's like, let me brush those teeth of the bantha. Honestly, that bantha.
Because you look at the gaffy stick and it had such a weird shape to it. I'm like, why does it have this real? Because it's not like they hit somebody with the 90-degree hook. And so now you're seeing, oh, that's what it's used for, which is kind of cool.
It's a dental tool. Who knew? And I think that, a bantha ride, I immediately am thinking, yeah, it'd be great to ride on a bantha, like they look adorable. Honestly. I mean, they're huge, but they look like it's a much more comfortable ride to ride on a bantha than it would be to ride on a blurg, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And so, this crate dragon they're saying that it's an abandoned Sarlacc pit, but, Din is saying that there's no such thing as an abandoned Sarlacc pit. He speculates or suggests that the crate dragon has eaten the Sarlacc. Now, what do you think about that comment?
Probably that he, well, I mean, that he ate it probably because the sarlacc. If you see the whole thing and it cut away, it looks like some Lovecraftian monster. And the fact that it just sits there in the sand and waits, the crate dragon goes deeper in the sand, so it come, right up and eat it. And the idea that it did that because it wants its cave is kind of interesting. Even though you look at this cave, and it's not like the sand dunes where the pit of Carcoon was. So it's like I'm trying to figure out the logistics of how the sarlacc, like maybe it just lives in there and hides, and then it goes out at night to nestle in the sands or something. But the fact that Din knows this suggests that either, once again, he's been on Tatooine probably a lot, or maybe there's the similar Tusken Raider type nomads and sarlaccs on other planets.
I'm also thinking that maybe since it seems, or at least it would appear that he spent some time with the Tusken Raiders, that there might be some legends about this. And, the Tusken Raiders' interpretation of wildlife on Tatooine is very different from ours, since they are fully immersed in that, as we saw, with the Massives, where they're kind of like pets for them, but for everyone else, they're very scared of these creatures. So, there may be a different connection or a different interpretation for them, how these creatures behave. And even the fact that they were willing to feed it to keep it, kind of hibernated and quiet shows that they're doing it. They're trying to think, how can we control it? But clearly that's cost them so much. And so they plan on luring the crate dragon out of its nest, so to speak. And since the belly is supposedly the most vulnerable part of the crate dragon, they're going to use a bomb to kind of like explode on the belly, and hopefully that'll kill it. But they can't do it alone. There aren't enough Tusken Raiders to do this mission. And so, Din tells Cobb Vanth that he volunteered everybody in the town, all the miners, to come and help to kill the this crate dragon. And they'll work together with the Tusken Raiders, as long as the Tusken Raiders get to keep the meat and the ichor, and they won't raid the people in the town anymore. So while they are resistant to this, Din finally has to kind of convince them and say, look, this is what's going to happen if you don't do this. You are all going to die. And so they prepare and they do this, and the Tusken Raiders come into town, and they're riding on these Tusken Raiders. It looks pretty cool. So it almost felt like they were riding on camels, but they're on banthas, honestly. And the Tusken Raiders are also on banthas behind them, and they kind of get these charges. Of course, it's a mining town, so they've got explosives, and they get these charges onto the sides of the banthas, which is part of the plan. And there's a little bit of tension between the Tusken Raiders and the townspeople, but they work it out, and they bury up these charges. And right before they're about to execute this plan, someone gives a charge over to Cobb Vanth, and it's a person by the name of Joe. And I'm like, they singled out this character on purpose, or at least it felt like they had singled out this character. Is Joe a significant character? I mean, is there any speculation about her?
No, not just some original character they came up with. And
okay. So I was like, gee, it's kind of funny that, he, instead of just saying thanks for the charge or whatever, he purposefully said her name, and you can kind of see her. And I'm like, okay, all right, well, maybe she'll come up again later on. So they get to in front of the crate dragon's lair, and it's in hibernation because, they've been feeding it regularly, and they have to wake it up. And they do wake up, and this dragon, I mean, it's vile. Like it vomits on them, and the vomit is deadly. And I wasn't expecting vomit. I mean, I'm sure in some book it says something about crate dragon doing that, but I wasn't expecting that. What did you think of that part?
Oh, it's cool. It's like, they're taking cues from Jurassic Park. Because not only are you setting up the goat to be fed to the T-Rex, but you're having the Dilophosaurus come out and spit his acid at you. And it kind of looks similar to that as well. And it's huge too. There's just the scale of it when it comes out, and that even the bombs that they've placed in the sand aren't really good enough to, don't really do anything. And it's like, this is going to cause, problems.
It really is. I mean, it is enormous. It's not a bad looking dragon. Like it looks like a dragon, I guess, if you could say this is what a dragon looks like, but it's definitely going to kill them all if they don't finish this. Like it will eat them all one by one in some way or another. And as they continue to mine, I'm sure that also draws attention to the dragon. So, he's like, oh, something's going on here. I better go and see what's going on, flies over to where they are and takes, their haul with them. And eventually, we have Din and Cab Vanth working together using their jetpacks, which is great. And the plan was to, as we were discussing before, to detonate those bombs in the ground so that the Krayt Dragon goes over it and explodes it. But it didn't really seem to do much damage to it, did it?
Not at all. Like I was saying, it didn't do anything.
Yeah. And so, Mando knows he's going to have to do something different, and he does. And that really scared me when it ate him like that, because it's so powerful. And I thought to myself, well, if he can't set off a detonation while he's inside of the dragon, because that would kill him. He would die from the shock, or at least I think he would. And so, out of nowhere, the dragon kind of submerges from the surface of the sand, and Din flies out of his mouth and then detonates it, and then the next thing you know, there's like Krayt Dragon everywhere, and everybody's cheering. And then we see this really nice scene of the Tusken Raiders kind of carving out the meat from the Krayt Dragon, which I really liked. And then, of course, we see those bones that we were obviously expecting. Honestly, Grogu is kind of like looking at them carving everything, and he's like a child on Thanksgiving Day when you see the turkey, when they're like, wow, look at that turkey, like his eyes are popping out of his head. But I actually wanted to ask you some questions about this pearl. The Krayt Dragon pearl can be used in a lightsaber. I mean, there was a huge discussion about this, but this pearl is huge.
Well, yeah, because the dragon's huge, so the pearl we figure will be pretty massive as well.
So, what are they going to do with this? I mean, I had heard about it, and everybody was talking about this pearl, and I'm like, they must do something with this pearl. It must mean something to the Tusken Raiders, or even to anyone else. It's probably very valuable.
Right, but I'm not sure what they would barter it for, because they live like very cheaply nomads. So it's like, again, what are you going to buy with this? Because they fight the townspeople because they're like, oh, you're stealing our water. And there's that one moment in the episode where they alluded to the fact that that's probably why they killed Shmi or kidnapped her. And it's like, well, I'm not exactly sure what they're going to do with the pearl, but it seemed like a callback for fans. It's like, oh, there it is. And it was kind of neat that whole climax was shifted to IMAX, because they shot that climax all with IMAX cameras, and you see the aspect ratio change as the camera was zooming in on ground level as the dragon was coming out of the cave. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, there were some wonderful action scenes in this, and of course anytime we get to see Mandalorians flying around using their jetpacks, it's always great. And so Mandalorian was very specific in not allowing Cobb Vanth to take a chance with his life. And I found that very interesting. He does that trick where he takes the back of his rifle and hits the back of the jetpack, causing Cobb Vanth to kind of fly out uncontrollably.
That was funny. That was a good callback.
It really was. I mean, it felt like when, Boba Fett kind of like had that unusual.
That's exactly what it is. This is when Han accidentally hit him with the staff and sent him flying into the sail barge. And it was also funny that Din made him promise to look after the kid if I don't come back, which is interesting that given that this is the mandate the armorer gave him, the kid is your priority, but he's willing to sacrifice that for the sake of satisfying this bargain, with it, or potentially not satisfying the bargain with Cobb Vanth, which is very interesting. It's almost like the fact that this guy has the armor takes precedence over this foundling, and I need to get this back. So, okay, this is what we need to do. It's like, I need to get this back first and foremost. The kid comes second at this point. So he's still got a little bit of that, cult-like thing going on.
He does, and I think sometimes his priorities shift a bit, and that's like, for example, I felt like even though IG-11 should have just gone to the ship with Grogu, I did feel like his priorities were spot on in protecting Grogu in a way, but only God knows why he decided to do that in that way. And it is ironic that it's the exact same jetpack that this happened to. So, here we go again with that all over again. And at this point, as Din and Grogu are leaving, Cobb Vanth surrenders the armor, thanks him, and says, I hope I see you again. But that's not the best part of this episode. I mean, we were hinted in season one of who we might be seeing in the episode. But when we finally saw Boba Fett here at the end, watching all of this transpire, we saw the back of him, and he's kind of looking off in the distance. You see the two suns, and then he turns around, and it's undeniably Boba Fett. I mean, I just I was like, oh my god, it's Boba Fett. Like you automatically just jump out of your seat with excitement. And I think that this particular episode set the tone for all the sort of exciting, expected there. We kind of expected a lot of this, but it is still a surprise sometimes when you see your characters portrayed in these different ways, because we haven't seen him in live action for so long. So this was just such a pleasure to finally see him there. And he's kind of looks a little, I wouldn't say worse for wear, but he looks like he's been through something, doesn't he?
Yes, and it's odd that he's been here for like 5 years, and who knows how long it's been since he escaped the Sarlacc, and he's just kind of watching this whole thing transpire. And it's like, why didn't you get your armor earlier? Is it believable that you wouldn't have been able to find this guy? And it's like, I think they're going to dive into some of that in the Book of Boba Fett, perhaps. If they don't, it'd be very bizarre. But I think the big takeaway from the episode is how Din Djarin has sort of started something on Tatooine, that by getting the villagers and the Tuskens to come to an understanding with each other, that's going to probably potentially have ripple effects across the whole planet, and likely for the better.
It really has done that. And the other thing that I was going to say, in addition to that sort of letting things sort of go to cooperation, one thing that stood out too was that Grogu didn't actually use any powers in this episode. And I think it's interesting because I don't think Grogu can take action sometimes, because if he does, it might prevent the need for collaboration. So, you could see Grogu try and control the Krayt Dragon, and let's say he killed the dragon or did something worse or made it easier.
Also, the only 2 times he's intervened, or the 3 times in the past, when people really needed him, like when he saw Din getting choked out, or the arm wrestling thing, he didn't understand that, and he thought, oh, he needs help. Or when he saw him getting beat up by the Mudhorn, it's like he needs help. Or Grief Karr got cut, and then Din Djarin was cut. Oh, I need to heal them. Whereas in this case, it seems like he's got it under control. There's a bunch of people there helping them, the Tuskens and the villagers and Cobb Vanth, and he's just kind of watching. Oh, okay, just like whatever. I don't know if the child would necessarily be as powerful enough to have stopped the Krayt Dragon, or at least for any length of time for Mando to have been able to, do anything to stop, to blow it up. But
no, you make a really good point. It's possible that his powers really just aren't that strong at this point, and he hasn't matured yet.
Because it does take it out of him every time he uses it. Like, he passes out for like several hours.
Yeah, he gets that force fatigue, and it just knocks him to the ground. I mean, he was at normal level of energy, and then I guess maybe it's because of lack of use or lack of practice, he gets that force fatigue, and then he can't do anything, and then it's like, hey, are you okay, buddy? Hey, wake up. He just completely passes out. But I have to say that I really did love seeing Boba Fett there, and we kind of got a sense that, first of all, that he was alive, but secondly, that his life was not over, and therefore he had a lot more living to do, and we were going to be seeing that because he was placed there purposefully. So for me, this just was so exciting to see him there. And of course, I think that we have a lot of situations in this live action series for season 2 where we get to see characters that we've been wanting to see in live action, maybe have never seen them before, or it's been a long time since we have seen them in live action. And certainly season 2 delivered a lot of that.
And now think on it. I wonder, with the trailer for the Book of Boba Fett, if we'll be seeing Cobb Vanth again. That would be fun, because he was actually my favorite part of this episode. I thought that was great casting, and that character was just so much fun.
He was perfect, wasn't he? A very charismatic character. Whether the story of how he acquired the armor was true or not, I don't know whether it really matters. What matters is that, he made a difference with his town, and he made a friend out of Din. And, Din knows he can call on Cobb Vanth or go to Mos Pelgo anytime he wants to. And, if he needs help or for any other reason. And, and it'll work out. And you're right. It was kind of like the way that he built the bridge between them and the Tusken Raiders. Now, there are so many factors. I mean, we saw in the Book of Boba Fett trailer how we saw so many Tusken Raiders, and maybe that relationship that he built will help the Tusken Raiders having to just deal with all these people on their land all the time. Like, it must be just so annoying for them to have to deal with the level of disrespect that people have for them.
Right, because when they were camping out with the Tuscans on the night on their journey over to the cave, they mentioned their conflict with the villagers. They mentioned, hinting that's why they kidnapped Shmi and all this stuff, but they didn't mention anything about any type of conflicts with somebody like Boba Fett. Now, I know in the Darth Vader comics, when Vader goes back to Tatooine after the original events of the original film, he discovers this Tusken encampment where they're just kind of regarding Vader as this. He's kind of almost like he's having a vision of it, and like this evil. It very much stuck in the Tusken's mind when Anakin had come there and slaughtered them, and so they're very alert to these type of things. So when you see Boba Fett in the finale there, and he's got the gaffy stick and the cloak and everything, I'm like, if he killed a Tusken for that, they would probably be hunting him. But they didn't mention anything about some dark warrior, some super power. So I'm wondering if maybe he already has an established relationship with the Tuskens, like you said, because we see them in the trailer for the Book of Boba Fett. So maybe there's he's actually sort of befriended them already as well. It would make sense because, again, we don't know why Din Djarin knows their language and knows their culture, but it seems to make sense that Boba Fett might know it too.
Definitely. And perhaps the Mandalorians have a penchant for making friends in unusual places too. We talked about how, obviously Din is a bounty hunter and he has skills and tries to do things and tries to get along. He has to do this as a survival skill alone. If anybody was going to survive, and there's been such a big debate about Boba Fett's survival after that Sarlacc pit, if anyone was going to survive, it was going to be Boba Fett. He's been through so much and he knows how to survive impossible situations. And this did really feel like an impossible situation. So, obviously we've been hinted or teased with the Back to Tank trailer, or scenes there. So, clearly he has a friendship with the Tusken Raiders that a lot of people appear not to have. And I think it's maybe just out of fear of the Tusken Raiders. They probably are very, very skilled warriors. I don't really know too much about their abilities.
I can see why the local normal populace of Tatooine would be afraid of them, because given how sparse resources are out there, you're obviously going to come into conflict with them because they're going to accuse you of stealing their water when you go out onto these sand dune flats to take it. Whereas with Boba Fett, I think it kind of makes sense that he might have a relationship with them, and same with Din Djarin now that I think on it, because they're both, in a sense, Mandalorians are kind of like nomads as well, or have been for quite a long time. And Boba Fett, especially having to pull himself up by his own bootstraps after Jango got killed, he might have some type of extra respect or way to relate to them because he's been very much on his own for decades.
He really has. And, even with the manual that his father left him about what to do in certain situations, it doesn't work for everything. And so he's kind of had the school of hard knocks, if you will, after his father passed away. And, he's been knocked around quite a bit, in my opinion. And I'm hoping now Book of Boba Fett will show us where he's not being knocked around anymore. That's what I'm hoping for, where he can kind of really start to live, even though it's a very difficult situation that he's placed himself into. This is not going to be an easy road. It's going to be a bumpy ride for him. So, but I also hope that we see the Mandalorian Din in the Book of Boba Fett. And it sounded like it was his voice in the trailer. So I hope we see a one or two encounters of him still being around. And, perhaps, Din can return the favor to Boba Fett every now and then when he's in need, mainly because of his ability or past experiences in the galaxy. So I really loved this episode. I thought it was a great introduction into season 2. And as I said, they were doing exactly like what we thought they would be doing when we come upon them in this episode. What are your final thoughts on episode 1, Catherine?
I think it's a great pilot, better than the pilot episode of the first season. It feels, even though it's 50 minutes long, it feels longer, but in a good way. It's like a mini movie. And I think a much more exciting chapter on Tatooine than the equivalently lengthed chapter on Tatooine from Phantom Menace, and this one is just, and like you said, it does harken back to a lot of classic westerns. The fact that he is bringing these two sides together, Cobb Vanth being as charismatic as he is, seeing a krayt dragon in the flesh for the first time, and just how impressive that is. Learning more about the Tuskens' culture and having long-standing myths about them that we've had as fans shattered. It's a really, really strong opening for this season.
Yes, and I hope we'll also find out a little bit more about that krayt dragon pearl, which seems incredibly valuable in as far as I'm concerned, and we can learn a little bit more about it.
Yeah, I take it that the Tuskens aren't going to chop it up and eat it.
No, they sure
like
are not going to. And maybe there are more things that we need to learn about the Tusken Raiders. About one thing that I did hear that someone was kind of criticized was that they felt that the way that the Tusken Raiders valued the banthas, that they would never use a bantha as a bait for something like this. And so, I know some people who have read the books that have said things like that, and I get that. I thought that this was just maybe a desperate situation for them, and they had no choice.
You don't get the sense that other than the mastiffs, which are still pretty small for a krayt dragon, that there's not many other fauna you could draw from on Tatooine to and if you don't keep the krayt dragon subdued, then it's gonna eat everything and everyone. But yeah, otherwise they probably wouldn't have done it. And I also thought that was funny also at the end when they allow Din Djarin to take a ton of the krayt dragon meat, and Grogu's just like really excited about that because they get to take it with him.
He's got his little hand on it. He's like touching it, and I'm like, this is such an adventure for him to see this whole thing happen. And
a little carnivore.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm just curious. I wonder what it tastes like. So it really stirred my imagination. This particular episode stirred my imagination so much. And, they did a great job with it. It looks great. It really was an inspiring episode for the start of the season. So thank you for joining me for this review of episode 1 for season 2 of, it's actually chapter 9 is how they refer to it, of The Mandalorian season 2. And of course, Catherine, we're going to be continuing with the next chapters as well. Catherine, where can people find you?
You can find me on the Phantasmagorium Show YouTube channel on Wednesday nights, hosting Martinis, Gadgets, and Guns with Scotty. You can find me on the Virtual Cantina Network every second and fourth Sunday of the month, hosting the Unifying Force at 8 a.m. Pacific. And you can find me Twitter at SlySnide, or on the Phantasmagorium Show or Postkeep Singularity Facebook pages.
Excellent. And of course, you all know you can find me here on Positive Fandom on this channel where, we feature shows like this, and we're going to continue this series. But you can also find me on Toxic Femininity on Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern on Night's Edge. And every other Thursday, you can find me on Uncivilized Scoundrels on the 1/6 Scale Man Network. On Friday afternoons at 12, sometimes you can find me on Midnight's Edge in the morning. And at 3 a.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Pacific, you can find me on Midnight Metal on the Burr Network. And thank you so much, everybody, for watching this episode review for season 2, chapter 9 of The Mandalorian. We're going to continue the series. There's going to be more videos leading up to the Book of Boba Fett. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the show. And remember, everybody out there, please be kind.